Okay, here we go. Let's go ahead and get started here now. Um, Let me see what we got going on here. Let's go to the stage. Put myself over here, and we'll go over to Grok and see what we're discussing today. The breakup of the continents. Now, I wanted to do the time light thing, but I don't think people are really interested in that or don't understand it. It's hard to understand relativity. I tried to explain it a bunch of times, and it doesn't seem like people are catching on to the significance of it. So I'll go for at least controversial, less controversial breakup of the continents, uh, more or less 2,200 BC, whatever. So, the Bible says, in the days of Peleg, the earth was divided. And according to all the evidence, it was a rapid breakup post-flood supercontinent. So, in other words, after the flood, the continents were still all connected, as evidenced by the following evidence. The mechanism: single landmass post-flood held flood-deposited sediments, sandstones, limestones, marble even. Or it's hard to say when the marble was made, but it was probably during or after the time of the flood, maybe during the breakup, I don't know. Possibly a lot of marbles were made during the breakup, which was 100 years after the global flood. So we got here, it's better be working. We have a fragmented landmass. What happened is that the sediment layers solidified and began to crack and were conducive or in the right conditions for a breakup. Now, it's very likely that the initial cause was due to an asteroid hit, which caused the breakup, which could have been the one to hit near Mexico or the Gulf of Mexico. But, that's worth investigating. But as they were originally together, they were all toward the South Pole on one side of the South Pole. So right even in that condition, the Earth would have been lopsided as it rotated. So it would be rotating lopsidedly. So then ice accumulated, of course, at the South Pole, which probably wasn't the South Pole today. Could have been the South Pole, could have been like in Africa. It seems to have been South Africa. It's just an idea. It looked like that's where the South Pole was, according to all the glacial striations in South Africa. But of course, the glaciers started to accumulate, making the landmass even more lopsided. So the Earth is moving all lopsided. Then, when it was hit by the asteroid, the whole thing broke apart, and the centrifugal force of the spinning Earth caused all the continents to separate, break apart, break off of the South Pole or Antarctica, break away from Antarctica, and each one of them moved north. And as they moved north, of course, they separated from each other as well. But in the process, we're going to see all of the subsequent result or evidence that resulted from this breakup. So the subduction zone sank, the ocean crust, and the seafloor spread and created new crust separating continents Africa, South America, at rates meters per second. According to ICR. Now, of course, ICR would say that happened during the flood, and I'm suggesting it happened 100 years after the flood, because you have to have the sediment layers deposited first, then the seal or the stamp of the glaciers at the South Pole, and then you have the breakup. It has to be in that order. Otherwise, it's not going by what the evidence shows. So then centrifugal force. Earth's rotation accelerated northern fragments, Laurentia and Siberia, toward the Arctic, positioning modern Arctic regions, Greenland, Canada. This explains the frozen temperate fossils, dinosaurs, plants dated from 5,000 years in the framework. Well, yeah. Now, the frozen animals and the fossils are two different things. I mean, depending how you define a fossil. If it's a buried dinosaur, that would have been in the sediment layers. The other frozen animals and plants up in the Arctic are the result of instant climate or instant temperature change, we'll say, and subsequent tsunamis, because as the continents are going north, it's going to raise the sea level up in the Arctic, and it's just going to cause tremendous tsunamis, and that is exactly the evidence that we see up in the Arctic and in northern parts of Europe and everything. Evidence: Arctic fossils, magnetic alignments in the flood basalt suggest rapid northward shift. That's according to ICR. And of course, scientific challenge: centrifugal force is minimal versus mantle convection. Well, if there was a sudden breakup for whatever reason, it wouldn't have been minimal, and it, of course, is now equalized. You have an equalization of the so that everything is now spread out more, so that it's not as oblong, and it's not all at the South Pole. It's like spread out more evenly. Okay, so the formation of the Grand Canyon probably happened at the same time, sediment subduction, because of the fact that all the sediments from the Grand Canyon are not present. So that if the Grand Canyon happened right after the flood, or happened after the breakup, then there should be sediments from the Grand Canyon in the ocean. But since the Grand Canyon was being formed as the subduction was happening, it means it subducted all the sediment layers. Now, I've heard an explanation that all the sediment went to California, but what about right where the Grand Canyon is? There should be some sediment layers there, but they're not. They're subducted because it happened after the 100 years after the flood. The breakup happened after the flood instead of during the flood. Because otherwise, if it happened during the flood, or as the waters were receding from the flood, you would expect to have sediments from the Grand Canyon right there. And of course, there was uplift formation. Flood deposition. The global flood laid down thick sedimentary layers, kaibab, limestone, Tapete sandstone across the Colorado Plateau. Erosion during the breakup, receding floodwaters and tectonic activity carved the Grand Canyon, possibly via breach dam model, draining post-flood lakes. So this breakup, I think, is probably what caused, and the subsequent uplift is what caused the Grand Canyon to form. And of course, it's what pushed up the Rockies, the Andes, the Himalayas, and all that stuff, of course, were pushed up at that time, at the breakup of the continents, which was had to have been after the global flood, after the sediments were deposited, after the glaciers formed in the south. Evidence of folded strata, speed sandstone, indicate rapid compression. We'll forget the scientific challenge because there's no such thing as millions of years, because we have a history going back to the time of the flood. And they say it's too slow, but that's the rate. You can't use the rate of what it's spreading right now as the rate that it was always spreading. That's not going to work. Okay. CPT-driven mantle, updwelling or isostatic rebound raised the Colorado Plateau, exposing strata to erosion. Flat strata and steep canyon walls suggest rapid uplift. Okay, requires slow tectonics, but we're just going to count that out. Uplift of major mountain ranges, of course. The mechanism is that the forces compress the continents, but also as the continents are being pushed north, they're also being compressed, which is evidenced by all these formations: the Rocky Mountains, the Himalayas, the Andes, the Brazilian Highlands, the Appalachians, and the centrifugal force made all the continents drift north, and even Antarctica was probably on the other side of the South Pole, but it probably moved over the South Pole, which was in South Africa. But as Africa moved north, South America moved north, India moved north, Australia moved north, each one with the glacial striations, to so much to the point that India, which is now above the equator, still has glacial striations from when it was connected to Antarctica. And all the other continents have the glacial striations as well. Okay, all the fossils line up. And okay, there was a separation of animals and people and haplogroup dispersal. The Tower Babel. Humanity in China built the tower, followed by language confusion and dispersal. Animals, marsupials to Australia, dinosaurs to Arctic, and people were isolated by continental breakup. So in other words, the people were isolated, but the animals crossed from Africa to South America. And even, there's Asian tapirs and South American tapirs. How'd that happen? There's a whole bunch of animals, possums and opossums, which is the same animal, of course. Greater grison and honey badger is the same animal. Okay, Nimrod, son of Cush, spread to Asia, Oceania, and the Americas. Okay, evidence haplogroup distributions mapped 5,000-year migrations. Okay. Answers to specific questions. Greatest Hamitic king and where he ruled. Answer updated. The greatest Hamitic king, of course, is Nimrod. The greatest king ever in the world from the beginning was Nimrod. and he was the son of Cush. Hence the C haplogroup, which is Hamitic, right in the middle of the Hamitic haplogroups, A, B, C, D, and E. E being Mitzrayim, D being Canaan. C is right in the middle. It's Nimrod. Cannot be anyone else. It can only be the house of Nimrod, meaning that Nimrod reinforced his genes within the population hundreds of times over, of course, which was the same thing that Israel wanted when they wanted a king. They wanted the same kind of king that would have many, many, many sons, descendants. Of course, reinforcing the genetics of that particular person within the population many times over. Historical figures responsible for Hamitic C haplogroup. Okay. Assigned to Nimrod, the son of Cush, of course, did not produce Canaan and did not produce Mitzrayim, and nor is it derived from A, Put, or D, but it's derived from B because B is Cush. And if you look at the Genome Simmons project, you'll see that the C separates from the B at the exact point of B. So it's split from B at that exact point, that genetic distance. Nimrod, Mesopotamia, carried C, founded Babel, spread to Asia, Oceania, and of course to the Americas as well. Hence the Olmec population that looks Polynesian, because Polynesians also have a C haplogroup because they have the same common ancestor, Nimrod. Okay, unnamed Cushite descendant to Asia, Oceania. Nimrod's followers carried C, post-Babel, paralleling the mitochondrial B. Well, actually, that's not true. It's the mitochondrial A. The mitochondrial B crossed the Pacific Ocean on the opposite side of the Atlantic and is totally unrelated to the migration of A. Well, actually, A probably migrated with Q anyways. Okay. Keeps on talking about Nimrod so much, I don't know. Okay, so we got synthesis and connection to the framework. He didn't mention the animals very much. The frozen animals, all the elephants, the bears, the wolves, the lions, the antelope or whatever they are, or the reindeer, and even someone's dog that might have been frozen some other way, but a lot of these animals were either instantly frozen and or buried by tsunamis. There's both conditions in the Arctic and Siberia and North America. Okay, so Babel and dispersal, language confusion, scattered tribes. Of course, this was after the breakup. This is after the breakup of the continents, which was a traumatic thing when the continents broke apart. It was very traumatic, of course. There would probably be huge seismic activity, or a lot of seismic activity, which would have caused what? Would have caused everyone to run to their family groups and isolate into their family groups and begin speaking their own languages, which is exactly what happened. So the KMMNS in Papua New Guinea They are descended from Tubal. It's all one line, K, M, and S. That's Tubal, which is Eurasian. Of course, C is a Kushite. Nimrod's a Kushite, but he's not. Didn't go where the Kushites were. Never went to Africa, but he's the son of Kush, so he's technically a Kushite. Okay, even though he never went to Africa, nor any of his descendants. And we'll skip the deep time because that's just imagination right there. There's no evidence for deep time. Conclusion: breakup of the continents, amplified by centrifugal force, separated continents, isolating animals and people. No. Well, it caused people to isolate into family groups, but it separated the animals on the different continents because the animals spread out while the people were busy building the Tower of Babel. Okay, so the mountain ranges rose up, rapid collisions, and just the pressure, the mountain ranges were caused just from the pressure of the breakup of the continents, as the continents were being pushed north and separating from each other. That's what caused all the mountain ranges, the Appalachians, the Rockies, the Andes, the Brazilian highlands, of course, in India, the Himalayas. There was a lot of pressure going on that caused all this uplift of the mountains rising. When in the Psalms where it says the mountains rose, it's referring to that event. Okay, then the confusion of language, dispersal of tribes, and finally, people isolated into their family groups and began spreading out, which is the reason for the 16 ancient civilizations from the 16 grandsons of Noah. Okay, so let's go back. Let me see if I can go back here. If I got a chance to go back. To address the haplogroups, the different families, people isolated into their family groups. Okay, so here we go. Okay, we have Japheth, seven grandsons. Japheth's sons, 7 grandsons. They all have this K. They're identified by this S&P marker KM9. Anybody has this marker, KM9 is a Eurasian descended from Japheth. Okay, we have Gomer, his 3 sons, Ashkenaz, Riphath, Togarmah, which is not mentioned here. It's R1A, R1B, and R2. Ashkenaz, Riphath, and Togarmah. Magog, Scythian, Central Asia, Pontic Steppe, be the N and the O. So he's just talking about the KM9 marker on the N and the O haplogroup, which is Magog. And it fits N's present in Eastern Europe and Russia, and O's Central Asia. NO is a combined. They're all under K. All Eurasians are under K, but K is its own, wherever it is its own lineage too. Is it Iberian? K is in Iberian, Spain, and K is in, believe it or not, it's in Italy too, which he doesn't even mention here, but 8% of central Italy is still K, which is where Tubal was said to have been or resided, the tribe of Tubal, or the ancient civilization descended from Tubal. And then there's Meshech, assigned to P because it's in Eastern Europe and in and in East Asia. Is the basal, okay, road, Europe, Eurasia, Central Asia, and it's under K as well. Okay. Tiraz is the Thracians. Yeah, L. He's not giving the specific or the specific S&P marker for each one. Okay, and then we come to Shem's 5 grandsons. Elam is easy. Asher is fairly easy. Arpachshad is the easiest because of the Cohen modal haplotype. J1P58, meaning almost 50% of those that had the tradition of telling their sons that they are descended from Aaron as a priest of Israel, almost 50% of them have this marker, which positively identifies the IJ lineage of Arpachshad, which, of course, fits Judah, Israel, and Arabs. You know, it's so obvious. I mean, and you can't argue with the genetics of the Cohen modal haplotype, having been descended from Aaron of the tribe of Levi, of Israel, Abraham, Eber, and Arpachshad. So that's given. These are a little bit harder, but since they had trade with India, it can't be anybody else. They're the only ones else. Aram, F1 and F5, Lydians, F undefined. And we have Ham's sons, Cush, Ethiopia, Horn of Africa. So this area right here is where the B haplogroup migration starts. If you go to the HRAS site, which I've done before, it shows B spreading out from the land of Cush, which is like right there in Ethiopia, right west of the Horn of Africa. Okay, your B for Cush fits sub-Saharan African, 50% Bantu. B is a distinct Hamitic lineage with C as its son. Mitzrayim, of course, is easy because these are 3, actually there are 5 main groups, but of course the sons of Ham are only 4, with C as being the son of Cush. C being by itself in Asia gets its own haplogroup. So that makes up the 5 Hamitic haplogroups of Ham, or you can't really say African because the descendants of Nimrod never went to Africa, and actually neither did Canaan. The Canaanites lived in the Levant, and the Sinaites went all the way to Asia. The Sinite tribes, the namesake of Sino-China and Sinai, which is the land of Sin, of the tribe of Sin, or Sinim, they all have the D haplogroup, not derived from C. It's a total separate lineage, of course, because, of course, Canaan is Nimrod's uncle, not his father. So that's all pretty correct this time. Nimrod, son of Cush, Mesopotamia, Shinar, Babel, Erech, Akkad, Assyria, Nineveh. And of course, that in other texts he's called Sargon. That he's He's from Akkad, or he built Akkad. And then Babel, Shinar, or Babel, Erech, and Nineveh. And of course, the Assyrians are linked to the Akkadians, of course. If anybody's wondering who the Sumerians are, that is who the Sumerians are. It's the ruling class of the Akkadians over the Assyrians, which later became a mix of Assyrians and Akkadians, which the Bible details. Okay, your C for Nimrod, son of Cush. B fits the C present in Mesopotamia. Mongolia. C is distinct Hamitic lineage derived from B, not producing D or E, nor derived from A, D, E. Okay, so we got a table here. The Gomer, the Sumerians, Celts, M9, R1A, R1B, R2 is Ripfath. Ashkenaz, no, Togarma. Ashkenaz, Ripfath, and Togarma. Magog, NO, the Medes are Q in Asia and America. The A mitochondrial is what accompanies the Medes to America. So they went through the Mediterranean, up against the King of Lydia, through the Mediterranean, off the coast of Africa to Central America, spread out north and south from Central America, as shown or demonstrated by the haplogroup lineage of the Q, the A mitochondrial, the C mitochondrial, and the D mitochondrial. The C and D, of course, being Eurasian daughters, or daughters of Japheth. Greek Ionians, Tarshish, Javan T, Tarshish, Greece. So basically Mediterranean Sea people. And of course they sailed all the way to India as well, the far side of India. You'll see the T not just in the Horn of Africa, but the far side of India as well. Okay, Tubo, Iberians, Tabo, and Italy. Didn't say Italy, but they're in Italy as well. Which the K, M, and the S. The M and the S are in Papua New Guinea, and the only Eurasian lineage in the area is K, and it turns out that the M and the S branch off from K very, very far back. Okay, Meshech, Muscovites, Eurasia. Tiraz, the Thracians are L, they're Greek. They ended up in India too because of Alexander and his army. And the Elamites ended up in that same area, a little farther south, a lot farther east is the H Dravidians, Elamo-Dravidians. So if they're Elamo-Dravidians and the only Semitic haplogroup in the area is H, then the descendants of Elam have H as their haplogroup. It's very, very easy. Asher, the Assyrians, G. Arpachshad, the Hebrews, Chaldeans, IJ. And this, of course, includes Joktan, which would be the Arabic people, plus the sons of Keturah by way of Abraham are also in this IJ group. J1, J2. Positively identified by the Cohen model haplotype. Can't argue with that. Okay, Lydians are F, Arameans F, 1 through 5. Not very common, but existing. Cush is B, Mitzrayim is E. Put originally Libya, but they got pushed to the west and Central Africa, and even as far as the Southern Africa with the Khoisan peoples. And the Canaanites, of course, are D. Levant and Asia, South Asia, Andaman Islands, China, Japan, Tibet, Altai Mountains. This is where you get the Denisovans, by the way. Between the D, the Canaanites, and the descendants of Nimrod, both of which are Hamitic. So the Denisovans are a mix of Hamitic DNA and the Eurasian DNA, which is in Asia, which is already in Asia as well. So that's what a Denisovan is. The Neanderthals are just regular Eurasians, not mixed with Hamitic DNA. It's very, very simple. Outline of continental breakup. There we go. We went through that. So that's just a little review with a little bit of additional information on the breakup of the continents, as evidenced by the glacial striations in South America, Africa, India, and Australia, all of which have glacial striations from when they were connected to the South Pole, which could only take place after the global flood, meaning the breakup of the continents could have only happened after the global flood. Of course, there's no mention of the dinosaur crossing between Africa and South America. This footprints pick up they leave one continent and pick up walking in the other continent. So that was before the breakup of the continents. Of course, that was during the flood, probably. So that's about it, about good enough maybe for today. And I hope everyone's doing good. There's Brother Timothy. Shalom. Shalom, shalom. Yep. And today is actually Shabbat Shalom. It's be Saturday. So hope everybody's doing good, doing okay, and hope everybody has a great weekend. And God bless everybody. Take care, and pray without ceasing. Pray without ceasing between you and God alone.